Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Brian Barber, you awaken me again from my long slumber. This must mean you and I need to attend to some cryptid hunting. Yet, please, I am starving. Absolutely delicious. I always do appreciate the offerings you bring me. Now that I am fully revamped, recharged, and ready to rumble, it is time for Bigfoot's Barber Shop and LordeStarfox to venture into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, once again, yes, you have tuned in to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Starfox Radio. Brian Barber, aka Bigfoot's Barber Shop, again has set up the late night fire for us so that we can burn the timber into the early hours and read a few more chapters from the Midnight Society book. Mr. Barber, what's good, dude? How you doing?
Mr. Barber is glad to be inside near the coffin because outside here in Michigan, I'm freezing my Bigfoot fuzzy nuts off.
That is so awesome. It's pretty cold up here too. Is what it is, you know, when you got that cold blood in your New England style and vamp lifestyle. Well, you just kind of accept it, I guess. And speaking of Bigfoot, I watched an interesting thing earlier about the Tennessee wild man. It's for another time, we can dive into it more, but it just really kind of solidifies what I'm saying about the differences of some looking more apish and some seeming to be more human ancestor based, because that wild man seems to point in the direction of the human based ancestors. You do have some ape versions. There's even people and indigenous cultures that speak about the wild men and Sasquatch battling each other. It definitely seems like a different type entity. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, when we get into that one, we can get into the fact that I think some of the Dogman sightings are actually mistaken Bigfoot because of the type called a gugway.
Mm-hmm. The devil monkey and also the devil baboon right there. Yes.
Yeah. But like I said, we can do that another time because that's a deep one. That's one of my favorite ones, is talking about that gugway, because he's just a nasty man.
You can actually touch on some of that because I do have a really interesting encounter down in Florida that I would like to read. It involves a baboon. You can actually touch, like I said, on this for a little bit, because when you look at the differences, you know, you definitely see something very similar with the devil monkeys, gugway, baboon like Dogman, which is very intriguing because, again, that points in the direction that we might be dealing more with something primate based in the whole quote unquote Dogman phenomenon more than an actual canine, which I've broken this down before, a little speed forward so everyone can get caught up. Wolves and dogs, yes, can stand up on their hind legs, and wolves do sometimes do that to look, actually very often, to look over foliage and grass to see things they're going to prey on. Picture a giant jet black Canadian wolf standing up on his hind legs for a second, looking over the grass. If Brian and I saw that, holy Christmas trees, look at that thing. It's a bipedal giant wolf. That is coming into play. I understand that. That is canine. Now, with a lot of these other behaviorisms, it points towards primate and hyena. You hear things such as the face eater. Well, baboons love doing that. Actually, a lot of animals do. The nutrients are there, but baboons are infamous for that, as well as other primates, because they go for parts of the body that immediately maim you, meaning they know that you and I need our eyes, our nose, our fingers, our sexual organs. They go and demolish all of those. It's pretty brutal stuff. I'm going to toss you the mic here for a few, eh?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want a prime example of that behavior on a person, look what Travis the chimp did to, I can't think of her name, but, first thing he did was take her face off. And there's plenty of other keepers that are missing fingers because of the fact that, like you said, they take your feet, they take your hands, face, private parts, and then they play with you after that because you can't defend yourself, you can't see what's coming. And when you touch on the baboon thing, it's one thing to see a baboon in a zoo or to see one on TV. Even see it in a zoo, you still got a pretty good distance away. But, I don't want to say fortunate because I still have nightmares about seeing the olive-nosed baboon in this tiny little cage. And it looked like glowing yellow eyes, even though technically they weren't glowing. They just appeared to be because of the color of the eyes. And if you caught a quick glimpse of that, I mean, this baboon had to be 5 feet. It was taller than that because of the cage. So I'm 6 foot. It would have been 2 foot off the ground. So you see a baboon that, is 80 to 100 pounds and is raging. You could definitely, with other foliage being around, mistake that for being a canine. No doubt in my mind, because the first time I saw it, you could only see it through a slit in the cage, and then we went and saw the whole thing when they tranked it to get it out of the cage. And it does look different. So it could definitely be mistaken for, if you want to say, a Dogman. I'm not saying that's what it is. It's my opinion that it could definitely be mistaken because once they curl their lips back and you see those 2-inch fangs, 3-inch canines hanging down, that's scary. And if you get a quick glimpse of it and it makes some kind of monkey noise and you're not familiar with it, you could totally go off and think you saw a Dogman, and you're technically you're not lying because that's what you believe. It just happened to be mistaken because of a quick glimpse. Which in Florida they do have an established population of baboons running around after Andrew went through. Same thing with the pythons. That all happened relatively along the same period. They have that issue every time a hurricane goes through with animals getting out, and that's why the chimpanzees are established. You've got capuchin, the little organ grinder monkeys running around. They're established. The weird thing is you definitely never want to get close enough to be bit by one because as bad as it sounds, I think the figure is somewhere between 95 and 98% have STDs, which means if you get bit, you're going to get something. But down in Florida, you could definitely, when you're talking skunk ape, which is the Bigfoot version down there, or the Dogman, if it's under 5 foot, it could definitely be a monkey. You can't write that off. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Dang, creepy stuff right there for sure. I don't even know really how to fathom all that. Unfortunately, people can look it up. We can't touch base too much about it here. I don't know how YouTube feels about it, but there are instances where primates and such were used to see how things would affect hominoids. Gnarly stuff for sure. And a baboon is straight up terrifying, as you stated, just by their appearance and how they act, quadrupedal, bipedal, which is what people say that they see when they're running. They see them up in trees, okay? Another baboon type like behavior. They then say that they have raccoon or long human like, squirrel like hands and arms, etc. Again, baboon right there, long claws and nails, baboon right there. Elongated canines, baboon right there. Glowing eyes, like you just said. Actually, yellow baboons do have nocturnal vision because they have to deal with leopards. They are very aware of what's going on, so they've adapted. Okay, large manes, boom. Strange calls and vocalizations, horny type ears, elongated snout. They also have a tail, and they travel in packs. Just interesting. Not again saying that every Dogman encounter is a baboon or primate, but there's a lot to solidify right there that we're dealing with some sort of primate type behaviorisms. I mean, am I incorrect?
No, especially when you start talking about the hands being, squirrel-like or raccoon-like, because baboon hands and chimp hands are very, very different. And gorilla hands. Baboons do have the long bony fingers, whereas the chimps and the gorillas have more, human, like football or boxerish or powerlifter catcher gloves for mitts. Yes, they got 5 fingers, but they're big, they're strong because, you're swinging even a 300-pound chip can swing through the trees all day long. So, but they do look more human. They don't look like a raccoon. So when you talk about Dogman having those types of features, and that's what people are seeing, like you said, not all of them are, but they do fit more into the baboon than an escaped chimp.
Great stuff again. Yes, that's just what I'm trying to solidify to people. 2006, it was on Monster Quest. Yeah, Doug Hijack. Well, Jody Cook found a baboon skull in Ohio. Like he says, a couple things, okay? Could have escaped, could have been somebody's pet, like the example you were talking about, just got too out of control, too much to handle. Or could it be an established population right there? All we know is it was a pretty large baboon skull in the middle of the forest in the area where people have had reports of Dogman, Ohio Grassman, etc. And there was a bullet hole in the back of its head. That's all we know right there. Again, what was a baboon skull doing in Ohio?
Right. And it's, definitely flows into my mind, an escaped pet or maybe a zoo, but depending where it was at. In my eyes, more of those are more escaped pets, or people take them somewhere and turn them loose because they can't deal with it. Just like they used to the pythons in Florida. That's not where the breeding population came from. That was a whole pet store incident thing that you can deep dive on another show. But, people do take their pets. Fish gets too big. What do? Throw it in the lake, wish it the best, and off it goes. And the same thing with, unwanted dogs. I call them people, but what do these beings do is take them out and just turn them loose and off they drive. Same thing with baboons, other types of monkeys. People have seen a few that escaped from when that gentleman down from the road from me had them. They still see a capuchin monkey every now and then. So apparently there's enough to keep breeding because this is 20 years later. And we got every once in a while you hear about a capuchin monkey running around.
Creepy stuff right there. Yeah, that's why you have alligators in the sewers of New York, because people, again, shouldn't have alligators as pets, flush them down the toilet when they can't have them anymore, or let them go in the sewers. They adapt. It's something that does occur. Also down in the Everglades, you have Nile crocodiles now because some bozo apparently found it intriguing to let a population that could reproduce of Nile crocodiles out into the Everglades. And I believe there's like 12 of them so far that have been documented. So not only do you have pythons now, you have alligators, and you have crocodiles. Oh my.
Yeah, and look like the snakehead fish. I don't know if you know too much about that.
So creepy, yes. There's a ton of cheeseball movies that sci-fi did about that, but in actuality, I believe it's an Asian-based fish that shouldn't even be here, but it can survive long periods of time out of water, basically slither across land. It looks like a snakefish. Yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah, and how the population got started was it's a big Asian cuisine. So these restaurants and markets were having them flown in and putting them in holding ponds. Being they can walk across the land, guess what? Away a bunch of them went, and that's where this breeding population came from. Is from importing them, putting them in holding ponds. Some of them walk away, and out come all the little snakeheads. I think they're as far as Washington D.C. now. They're
That,
really concerned about them hitting the Great Lakes.
yep. I mean, it's one of those things that people don't realize how something is so adaptive. It's no different than when things would travel over the land bridge and appear and adapt in other places, or how snow monkeys exist and Siberian tigers when the majority of their relatives and cousins, well, they exist in tropical or warm weather based areas. Here's something else for you to chew on for a bit. You have that encounter that occurred in Germantown, which we're going to be covering this way more pretty soon on the North American Dogman Project documentary that we're working on. One of the more legendary cases involved people reporting that they saw all throughout the night these strange canine-like looking creatures with glowing eyes trying to looking in their windows. All right. Well, they were originally told by local department that it was wolves from the natural animal reserve, which means apparently these animals would have been accustomed to seeing people all the time, had quote unquote escaped. Well, let's just play around for a second. What if it was baboons that escaped, right? Maybe, like you said, they didn't want people being bit by them, etc. Or it was, yeah, a big problem. Maybe some of them had rabies. I don't know. That's just something I'm giving an example to. So they tell everyone you got to go inside. All right, well, originally people were like, wait a second, they're just the wolves. No, you got to go inside. Then all throughout the night, they have reports of, like I just said, seeing these strange canine-like creatures. Well, again, we just touched on the hands, everything, the glowing eyes. Baboons would try to open windows and things, especially if they saw people on the inside. Now, imagine a rabid baboon. The reason I say that is I had somebody once tell me about a red fox, which, yeah, up here in Maine, red foxes, they're decent size, but they're nothing big. They're pretty small-ish. Well, this rabid one, this occurred up in Turner, Maine, decided it wanted to get inside of this family's house. It threw its entire body weight at the window over and over and over and over and over again. Eventually, it cracked the window a little bit, but it had done a ton of damage to itself. They had to call the local officials who came and disposed of it. This is a small little red fox. Now imagine, like you just said, a 5-foot baboon with rabies. That would legit look like a werewolf from hell, would it not?
Oh, at night, just catching glimpses of it from your lighting in your house and nothing on the exterior, really. And even exterior lights would probably just cast more shadows and make it even more terrifying. And then you see, rabies obviously comes to the saliva, foaming at the mouth. I mean, talk about campfire nightmare fuel.
Yeah, exactly. Again, they make crazy sounds. Rah, rah, rah. Just going nuts now. That would be pretty insane. There are videos out there people can check out, but I've seen one where there were, I believe, 6 to 8, maybe more baboons, just again making noises like that, running on the sides of rocks like they were Spider-Man and standing up, showing their canines, acting like complete savages. Again, I've spoken about this numerous times too, seen them climb into buildings where people are staying at like Airbnbs. They just rip open the fridge, start going ballistic mode. Yeah, they really aren't anything to mess with. I saw something on National Geographic earlier, a crocodile that wasn't too big, but it was big enough to unalive a very young baboon. Well, what do you think happened to this crocodile once the alpha baboons figured out what was going on? This huge one. I'm assuming it was the male because they did not say it was the mother. They said she had fallen in mud or something. I don't know. I always wonder if that's just a twist they put on to add a little bit more to the story. Like, oh no, the mom was stuck in mud, or if really the mother did fall into the mud until she got out. Either way, this enormous baboon goes over, grabs the freaking crocodile by the tail, and it ends up dropping the younger baboon, which is unalived at this point in time, but legit just starts beating it off the ground side to side, going absolute ballistic mode. Then later on, they're in a water shortage. These deer are coming over. Well, the baboons are just like straight up slugging the deer in the face and not letting them drink from the water hole. And I've again seen them grab sticks and rocks and beat the living Christmas tree out of a leopard that ended up being fatal afterwards. Again, according to the narrator, because this leopard had tried to unalive one of the baboons. Straight up gnarly, man.
Well, I think they're very, very capable of. Uh, we'll go with intelligence. Obviously, they're very intelligent, but also capable of revenge. You know, you mess with my family, and guess what? Now you got to mess with me too. And if you can get the alpha behind you, then the rest of the troop falls in line.
That's something, again, it's just super bizarre. I watched, you can't really ever figure it out, I guess. I don't know if chimpanzees and baboons live in the same area. I unfortunately don't have a correct answer for that. I do know that if scientists were able to document this, they would have an answer. They wouldn't be putting up their attributes, more or less. But it's cool what they do. You know, it's in hypothesis or theory mode of how this would unfold. Baboon versus chimpanzee. I mean, the chimpanzee is a lot stronger, but like you said, they aren't as comfortable seemingly up on their back legs, and they don't seem to run as fast on all fours either. They are, like I said, stronger. They also don't have as elongated claws as it seems like the baboons do either. I don't really know who would win the outcome of that because it's absolutely terrifying to think. I mean, I'm assuming just like anything else, it would probably unfold in different ways depending on who had the advantage. Meaning, if a chimpanzee gets the baboon down, it's stronger, just grabs its head or something, its jaws, you know, obviously. But then if the baboon catches, same thing, the chimpanzee off guard and starts slashing the heck out of some of its softer areas, who knows? Interesting though, for sure, to really kind of see the differences in the attributes. But it seems like the baboon, like I said, has the advantage in agility and also bipedalness and quadrupedalness, which again is falling into what a lot of these people are saying, just leaping all around, climbing the tree real quick, popping over to your roof, being here or there, up on two legs, down on all fours. I mean, again, just a lot of baboon-like behaviorisms.
Yeah, exactly. The speed advantage definitely goes to the baboon. I've seen some of the shows where you're talking about whether, who wins, a chimp versus a gorilla or something like that. And
Yeah.
stats are pretty interesting when you start comparing those primates because, the average gorilla is 4 to 6 times stronger than a guy, so they can bench press, and you're talking an average 400 to 500 pound gorilla, which isn't huge for a gorilla. That's, average for a silverback. They'd bench press 2,000 pounds. But then you get, 150 to 200 pound chip who's 8 times stronger than a human. It's like you wouldn't think they would be that close in power, but, I always love when people say, "Oh, well, pound for pound, this is this." It's like, wait, that's a great theory, but what do you think? You walk up to a polar bear and say, "Hey, this isn't pound for pound." He's just gonna eat you.
Yes, I agree with you fully on that. I saw something recently that chimpanzees are actually pretty successful at beating the crap out of and unaliving gorillas. It really seems like gorillas actually fear chimpanzees, which, like you said, the other way around, you wouldn't have expected that. Speaking of that term, pound for pound, I would say ants And chimpanzees are probably some of the more dominant ones per pound with how strong they are.
Yeah, what was the last one I watched where they compared everybody? I think as dumb as this sound was the dung beetle because it can lift 20 times its own weight or something like that.
Yeah, with the insects, it's so insane. That's what is just mind blowing. Some of the capabilities because we don't really think or even pay attention. But when you actually hear it like that, you're very baffled as to the quantum physics that fall into that, you know?
Yeah, because luckily things, at least for us, we're lucky things don't play out pound for pound. Otherwise, we'd be serving the ants and they'd be stepping on us. But the where was I going with that? That's why like Planet of the Apes is so interesting because if they do decide to revolt a little bit and with all the things they've done, it would be a very daunting task to try to do away with that. It's like if all the dogmen all of a sudden, whatever they are, I mean, we know something's out there. It's the same thing when you talk about Bigfoot. Yes, there's something out there. Can we definitively say what it is? No. All we have is, there's some DNA stuff floating around by certain individuals. There's most of it, though, is anecdotal evidence. And we both agree. I think you're a little stronger on it than I am. I tend to give a lot of people the benefit of the doubt until they F me over. But, human testimony is not the best thing. So anecdotal evidence can be real shaky ground to want to stand on.
Yes, it really is. I mean, it's tough because you have to look at it from like different aspects. Just as, for example, in sports, you have the analytical guys that are going to crunch the numbers, meaning if you go for this 4th and 1 and you run this play, then it goes through and they run that simulation pretty much to the max, right? And then they see the odds that, okay, you have a 73% chance to get this right here. You can still fail. That's what I mean about how it's interesting too, because I believe it takes in both aspects. You still need to have enough intellect to then process what you're being told to then make a proper decision off it,
Yeah, I mean, because we both know life happens. Brady's got a 92% chance to make the show. He runs back, his shoes untied, he steps on his lace, and he gets sacked. What are the odds? But, it could happen. Yeah. It's like watching, I was a big Dolphins fan, Dan Marino. The odds of him scrambling more than 1.5 yards were not good. So that's why he always threw the ball. Watching Dan Marino scramble was watching a 97-year-old with a walker try to take off.
That's so funny. Great reference, though. That's what it means is just the analytic aspect does need to, be looked at as well. If it didn't matter, for example, like Jeremy Swayman, huge Bruins guy, he's my favorite player, their goalie. Well, high danger save percentage is something that goalies are judged off of, which means basically being put in positions where they are actually below the percentage to make the save, meaning it's actually, in theory, easier for a goalie to make a save than it is for somebody to score. But there's still different percentages. Is Swayman always in a high-risk danger scoring attempt? No. But if he shines in those moments, that's an important factor. Maybe that can be filtered into something, meaning maybe the Bruins can be a little bit more offensive on a power play because they know Swayman's got a higher percentage of making that gnarly save if they have a shorthanded break from the other team or something.
Yeah, and bringing that back around to the Dogman thing in Florida, you have to look at the totality of everything going on. Where was it? What's around it? Eliminate all of the probable, and then you start weighing odds okay, what are the odds it was an escaped baboon? Are they greater than it being an unknown creature that hasn't been defined by science? So that's where you got to kind of lean on the unknown factor that we're talking about when you filter in that for a percentage. It's like, yeah, it could be. Is it most likely this, baboon? Maybe. But there's that minute chance that it could be. And when that little percent comes out that it is a dog man, now you got to really look at, okay, if one's real, then guess what? They're real, period.
It is one of those things that becomes very interesting because for every person that claims that they see something or have an encounter out in the wilderness, you have 5, 10, maybe more that have never seen anything. So could those people that spend all the time out there that have never seen anything be hiding that or lying? Sure. I mean, again, people lie in things. I don't really subscribe to that theory. People can subscribe to that and such, but as a journalist, I step back and I'm like, okay, well, you have some of these people that are claiming this is occurring, but then you have other people that spend just as much time that aren't. For example, Bart Schleisler, which, I have had a chance to speak about him before, basically the greatest outdoorsman that no one's ever heard of, okay? Well, as far as I know, he never had any sort of paranormal or cryptid type encounters, or maybe he just chose never to speak about it, but he traveled all around the world and spent a ton of time in the forest hunting and tracking animals. So it does, again, just make you wonder, and it piques the interest of, okay, well, these people right here that claim they saw this, from what I've dug up and what I think, I'm not subscribing to that. But then once you filter those people out, you still have some that are just like the other people I spoke about, experienced as into what they're seeing or what they're having contact with. But then people are like, all right, well, what do they have to gain off this? They have a lot to gain off this now, meaning it's not really so taboo anymore. It's pretty mainstream. Also with all the TV shows like Monsters and Myths in America, These Woods Are Haunted, Paranormal Witness, I'm sure there's more. Scariest Monsters in America, Scariest Monsters all around the world. Is there a subversion of that? Okay, you have all these shows now that will get you publicity, will get you fame, and you're also now taking people's time. People are trying to contact you. They want to speak to you. So it gives you a feeling of self-entitlement now, or like, hey, I'm captain of the cool kids. Maybe your whole life you weren't. Now you are controlling the narrative of something. I don't know. Those are just things that as a journalist I have to ask. I mean, because when people are like, well, what do they have to gain from that? They have a lot to gain from that.
Oh, exactly. If you never felt important before, and people have done it, we've called BS on people, and seen BS called on people who they want to feel important just for that shining moment. The problem is now, it's like you said, you've got all these shows and you've got everything else. That shining moment can become a real stain in the underwear for a very long time because the internet doesn't forget them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is you can even put famous people into that category, because now you've got Les Stroud doing what he's done and supposedly, got that one on film. But then you look at somebody like Fred Bear, who probably had more time in the woods than Les Stroud. I don't ever remember hearing a comment about him seeing either Bigfoot, Dogman, little people, fairies, nothing.
Exactly. Could he have, though? Yes. But like you said, that's all. I'm not trying to say people aren't seeing things. I'm just trying to understand why, like you said, some people do, but then other people that spend more time, or just, if not equivalent. Again, Greg Ovens, Rocky Mountain Ovens. He's awesome. I've never heard him speak about anything paranormal based or Sasquatch based. Could be choosing not to. Or maybe he's never experienced anything, but that guy's in the woods all the time. I mean, that's his purpose. He was on Alone and all kinds of survival shows. It's just something that does need to, that's all, be understood that there is something to gain from this now, because you get to a point of stardom. I mean, I'm not going to say a name, but for example, like one person that claimed they unalived a Bigfoot, or this other person claimed they unalived a Dogman. Still to this point, no one can really discredit it. A lot of people don't seem to buy into it, but you still can't fully discredit it. They're getting their more than 5 minutes of fame. Or the person that claimed his father got him a Dogman pup growing up as basically an emotional pet dog. Everyone knows this dude's completely gone. No one can really prove that because it's his testimonial. So until someone can sit down and literally prove 1000% from a mental aspect he's lying, same thing. This person's story is still consistently always floating around and getting clout. So that's all. It is important that people just pay attention to that. Not really just fall into the category like that person said the other day on a video where my science team and I were talking about the LBL. What do you mean? Someone came out and said they were there. Roger, oh my goodness, we're really going to pull this one, eh? And then they proceeded to say, well, what do they have to gain from this? Oh, we're really going to pull this one too? Why would anyone make that up? I didn't even respond to the comment except on the podcast when I was talking with Tremblay and Robert Prevost. I mentioned it. Everything I just said to you is what they have to gain off of that. Before I read you this gnarly encounter in Florida, how do you feel?
Here's an example of what can happen. And somebody sits on an encounter for 30 years and turns around, looks into things, has amazing things happen, and you wonder what brings them forward. We have an example of that between one of us on this show. You're talking about somebody who got in trouble by the DNR, who was feeding peanut butter to something for 3 years at, 9 times 4, 36, 4-pound jars of peanut butter per month for 3 years, and found tracks, has pictures of tree peekers, and also has a frozen what he believes Bigfoot turd in his freezer. So, I can empathize, but I never looked to be famous on this. I never even brought it up until I had shared in a group when somebody started talking about habituation.
Mm-hmm.
And that person just happened to have a small podcast. I went on and did the podcast to warn people what can happen. The only difference between me and Joe Blow, and trust me, I've taken a lot of heat over this, both ways. I just don't talk about it. I don't acknowledge it. It is what it is. I don't need anybody to validate it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got the peanut butter jars. I've talked to Dr. Melba Ketchum as far as the fingerprints on the jars and the hair on the jars. She put me in contact with a guy. Unfortunately, he's not in the game anymore. She and I still chat a little bit about trying to figure this out, if there's even any saving those fingerprints. So we both know that somebody has been on, as far as trying to gain something. I never tried to gain anything off it. There are people who do. So I can empathize with not wanting to share a story, because my first sighting in 87, I'd had paranormal activity in the house, and I got ridiculed relentlessly over that. So do you think I'm really going to tell somebody at the age of 16 in 1987 that I saw Bigfoot? F to the no. On my way home, it was like, oh, I got to tell this. And I'm like, I can't tell anybody. Nobody. I will never, ever hear the end of this, and it'll be written on my tombstone. Saw Bigfoot, wacko Barber.
No, excellent stuff right there. There was actually, I believe, might have been during Hurricane Katrina, there was a well-known journalist, a newscaster, that got caught making up his reports that he was actually in the whole entire thing and was recording everything, but in actuality, he was just taking like other segments and then doing quick little cameos and stuff. So that's just what I mean about, again, you had a journalist and newscaster right there. What did he have to gain? A ton. Apparently he was right in the zone of Katrina, but he wasn't though,
Yeah, that's what I mean. People are so willing to risk ever, because now, like you said, we've got the internet, we've got these shows. Anymore, you used to be able to get on the show, and then if you were full of BS, nobody heard about it because the show was already aired.
Yes.
There was never an after show. Now you've got the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear, even before the show goes on, that this person was on there, and now, while the show's in production to be aired, that this person lied, and here's why, and here's this, and this. So,
Yep.
you're risking it. That's why, I don't do a lot of interviews. I get a lot of offers, but I don't do them because I've been misquoted myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody with a big channel misquotes you, you look like a liar, because even though it's them misquoting you, it's not the words coming out of your mouth. So you have to be really careful. And people that, why would you want to be, I don't believe in the whole any publicity is good publicity. Why would you want that hanging over your head? And yet people do it for maybe an advancement in a career that you're going to lose because you lied.
Yep. Great stuff right there. To the audience, I do have this gnarly baboon encounter, but before we read it and then let Mr. Barber get rolling, that's a big reason the indigenous cultures don't like things being written down. Like Nuxium and Brother Nature, who's a really good friend of mine, explains, it's all oral based because they've been misquoted, okay? Meaning whether it was intentional or not. When someone wrote that down, it wasn't the way it was supposed to be depicted. And then people got negative and messed up stereotypical views of something that shouldn't have even been mentioned like that. Excellent observation. And I'm going to butcher this word right here. Hey, it's knowledge, eh? Florida, 1818. Apala Chicola. Ooh, a man-sized baboon is stealing food as well as other merchandise from local markets, and also seemingly stalking fishermen all throughout the swamp. After becoming scared, local villagers cautiously begin following the animal back off into the forest. To their dismay, they follow it back to a makeshift den it had made amongst the forest trees from leftover cotton bales north of town. Once noticing the encroaching men and soldiers, the strange baboon bolts off and was never able to be caught.
So the first thing that pops in my mind is the date, 1818, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do people over here even know what a baboon was? Where did that baboon like come from? Was that from the original report? Was that added in later?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a point of reference, but how do they have that point of reference? I mean, they didn't even believe in gorillas till what, 1921 or something stupid?
Most likely it's got to be maybe a liberty taken throughout translation, meaning someone realized who had seen a baboon that this is what they're describing, because, yeah, excellent point right there. Well, I got a couple spoiler alerts right here, because these next two that go back to back, I might as well cover them with you because they involve baboons as well, which I didn't even realize. Obviously, I realized when I wrote them in my book, but meaning I didn't think it was going to go like this. 1929, Sugarloaf Key, Monroe County. Residents of a farm witness an enormous baboon-like animal violently shaking a bat tower in their backyard in an attempt to get dinner.
Yeah, so again, it makes you... No, at that point, I believe people knew what baboons were. And again, point of reference. But how would a baboon be here at that time? I don't think they were really transporting them back in.
Right?
I don't know as far as history of circus and zoos, but I don't think baboon was on the menu.
Yes. Well, this one's gonna really get you thinking too, as the final one for the evening. 1942, Sugarloaf Key. Sounds familiar, right? Monroe County. A man is driving home during the afternoon when suddenly a human-sized, potentially bigger baboon-like animal emerges from the nearby forest, quickly leaping onto the man's truck. The strange baboon begins violently smashing his hood and windshield for about a half mile until leaping off and then running in a strange bipedal and quadrupedal motion back into the forest. There we go again, see? Quick, leaping on, beating the car. Again, that's happened in so many reports on like Bray Road and stuff of the Dogman. What do you think about that, man?
Yeah, I think that is just a point of reference as to what they're trying to describe, because they don't know. It's like looking at the clouds and saying, "Oh, there's a puppy." No, it's not a puppy. It's a cloud. No, it looks like a puppy. Or as you touched on, there's a certain person who smoked a Bigfoot, and in his testimony said it looked like a man in a suit. And then everybody jumps on him and says, "Why would you shoot a man or pop a man in a suit?" And he's like, "I'm not saying that's what it was. That's what it looked like." So same thing there. It's something they can't describe.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using a point of reference. And being Florida, and obviously we've got more than one encounter in the same area now within a couple of years. What is it? Yes, it looks like a baboon, but is it?
All three, right? Old school as heck. I just thought it would be great to tie up the episode, considering we had been speaking about this the whole time. The devil monkeys, the gugway, the dogman like baboon creature. There's something going on here with primates, their behaviorisms for sure. Just think that we just need to focus a little bit more and try to gather a little bit more rationale on it, and also potentially try to control our minds as to what we immediately go to. Meaning, maybe we've watched one too many horror movies, all right, and we think werewolves are awesome. For some reason, our mind just automatically plays to a werewolf being every shadow in the forest. The reason I say this as we start to wrap this up is one of the first depictions ever known for the chupacabra came from a woman who had just watched the movie Species, and her depiction of the chupacabra was almost identical. Does this mean her mind was already gearing in that direction? I'm not saying she didn't see something. She obviously did see something, but she didn't see it good enough. Her mind tries to fill in the pieces, and the pieces were she just watched Species.
Yeah, there's her point of reference. It's funny because we didn't even know where we were going to go with the show tonight, but I think it wound up being flowing very well. And then you touched on something, it just hit me, as the fact that it sounds like a lot of people want to jump to the Dogman or maybe Bigfoot or something like that. But you touched on the fact none of this is canine behavior. This is all primate behavior. Jumping on things, going from quadruped, biped, and the fact that it sounds, and I'm reading into this a little bit, but when they say drop to all fours, it sounds like more like watching a primate run where the arms are so much longer than the legs.
Yes, they hang down, man, when they stand up, and like they almost drag against the ground, like people say. And then baboons got the bent back canine-like legs. I mean, people can look this up. Yeah.
Yep, and like you just hit on, baboons have those bent canine legs, so mistaken identity definitely goes right, especially in Florida. I mean, if you go any place outside the natural habitat of those pythons and of those baboons, what's the closest replica of that environment? Florida.
Bingo.
So it makes sense that if these species come here and get loose, of course they're going to survive and thrive.
Yep, creepy stuff. Is there anything else you'd like to touch base on tonight, Mr. Barber, before we let you get Boogie in?
I think we nailed it tonight, but why push it?
Excellent. I do appreciate it. Well, to the audience, this will be, I got one more little quick thing for you, but there won't be a rebuttal. It's going to leave you thinking. I had a friend recently who was contacted by a woman who was driving a very large Ford F-150. She was hysterical, saying she hit what seemed to be an enormous baboon-like creature running in a hunched-over posture as it went across the road. Well, She immediately rushed to my friend's house. They went back. The baboon was not there, but the blood stain on the concrete of the road was. It led off into the desert-like area. She also had some sort of smudged body fluid on the front of her car. Interesting stuff. Again, to everyone out there, just keep on thinking and keeping that mind open, because sometimes things aren't really what they appear to be. But this will be the conclusion of the Midnight Society's meeting for the early morning hours. But no worries. You will hear from Mr. Barber again very soon. And also, we will have a few episodes of him churning out this week. There's a ton cooking up in the oven. So until next time, be good people and stay safe out there. And thanks for hanging out tonight, man.
My pleasure. It turned out great.
My creatures, I do adore every single one of you, and thank you for tuning in. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, share it, comment, feed the algorithm, and remember, there are things that go bump in the night, and we go bump back.